Hello, and welcome to the Roll-Wise podcast, the show that talks about things related to tabletop RPGs and other stuff that is related to tabletop RPGs. This today's show is going to be a kind of a laid-back excursion into probably one of the most random topics that we've seen, and we thought this would be something we'd like to talk amongst ourselves. Is that as we were navigating through Reddit, there was actually a really fun thread that was taking the question, what is your pettiest take on tabletop RPGs? And it was kind of interesting to see kind of how the community was, sharing their petty takes. Some of them were not so petty. They were less petty and more like big deals. So maybe the definition of petty really depends on who the person is. But I'd say that it was kind of fun. And I thought before we get into some of the comments that they shared and everything like that, I was curious if you guys wanted to share your pettiest take on, what your pettiest take about a tabletop RPG.
I think you should share yours first, since you've been keyed up about this since it came up.
I have been. So
he has
to share with you.
Mike brought visual aids to class today.
So I want to bring this book into the camera. This is the game Inevitable. It is a doomed Arthurian Western RPG. We actually just started this with our home table last night. Had a fun first session. A great start, I think, in my opinion. So correct me if I'm wrong. Please don't correct me. Let me have this. No, but one thing I have to say is that as I was reading the book, I was really quite surprised with this choice. Right here. This beautiful 2-page map has this giant butt crack right down the middle, obscuring whatever the center of the thing is, which is the city of Myth, the most important place in the realm. So a beautiful map, beautiful artwork throughout this entire thing. But the 2-page map where you basically just lose half of the cartography just to bad placement hurts me so bad on the inside. Yeah, and that's even worse than my why are the coasts always on the west side bit. So that's it.
No, I know what you're saying. The problem is though, when you have a map that gets past a certain point, it's too big for one page, and you're going to put it on two, and it's going to go so that it's a gatefold thing, so that you can see, the whole thing. But that one is unfortunate. No, I
right in the front. Then put it right in the front. Wide right in the middle.
Yeah, that's usually a little bit better. I prefer that they put some sort of fold out in the book, where if you really want to include a map, you can do that. I think that's usually the answer. I think the problem now is a lot of publishers are going to say, if you don't like how it's printed in the book, go look for it online. You can probably find a better version online now, but still, you're right. It's bad.
No, it's the issue with this one in specific is how deep that goes down, and you lose.
I think describing it as a butt crack is the wedgie map is probably inappropriate for usage. You definitely can't get a good enough usage.
No, it's because it's a beautifully produced book. The artwork's great. The map is really good. I'd just like to see more of it.
Yeah, it's honestly it is so beautifully done. It's a disservice to the artist.
And I was trying to think of other books that have maps in it, and I don't think I can think of a book that does that. Has done that recently.
What? I haven't seen it recently because most of the time when I'm looking at books, you're right. Even Electric State had a separate handout, and most of the maps that they provided were either one page or I don't remember exactly where they were, but I just don't recall that being there. And don't get me wrong, a map is just the most poignant example here, because that's literally if you were just had this book and you were looking at it and you were trying to get yourself acquainted to the lands of Myth and Inevitable, you'd literally be looking at this book going, what the fuck is that thing in the middle?
I can't find Myth. Oh, it's in the butthole position, buried in there. You can't really see it.
It's so weird.
I think that was a good one. I do. It's.
But I mean, I have petty takes about game economies and stuff like that too. If we want to talk about Dragonbane, I could throw that one in here too. But
what are you talking about?
That's not petty though. That actually could break a game if somebody's not careful.
I enjoyed selling goblin swords.
Fair enough.
That's a player problem. That's not a petty problem. That's a players going, wait, swords sell for how much? we could harvest these from goblin tribes. They're not weak, guys. Stop it. That's not necessarily petty. Like I said, that's an economy thing that could easily be exploited. And if it was a video game, it would be horribly exploited.
Yeah, they're just getting anything really to spend it on.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem.
Yeah, it was kind of like we don't care if they cost a lot because there's nothing to buy.
Yeah, sorry guys, there's nothing to buy worth. So you now can buy anything you want in town. Good for you.
But we've bought 3 wagons and 6 oxen so that we can put all the harvested weapons.
Right.
So that's my take. What about you guys?
My pettiest opinion is the oldest pettiest opinion that I've expressed on this show many, many times. It's people trying to put other flavors of games in D&D. Like trying to make your cyberpunk Edge Runners characters in D&D in 5th edition, and how like just play a different game.
Yeah,
if that's what you want. Like you can use a D20 system, I guess, but just try something else if that's what you want.
That's fair.
And then the other one was the one. There's one on the Reddit post that I agree with, which is the naming conventions for Savage Worlds editions and how it's just kind of confusing as to what you're looking at. Like,
sure,
Adventure Edition, Deluxe Edition. There's another one, the newest one.
So they have Explorer Edition, Adventure Edition, and Savage Worlds Deluxe, which don't really sound like different editions. They sound like different tiers of books,
right? Like different, like different information, right?
Yeah, like you would get one would have like the faux leather cover, aka the Deluxe Edition, because sounds like nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of confusing. But I think those are the 2 things that I would take. And the one is just petty because people should just. It shouldn't make me as angry as it does. People can play whatever games that they want and however they want, but.
No, they can, but there are great games specifically designed for certain settings and certain types of games.
And I specifically think
not everything has to be Dungeons and Dragons or 5th edition or 3rd edition or whatever the hell edition you play.
And that specific article that started the small conniption fit that I had, not mentioning the fact that there's a whole game called Cyberpunk Red that they could play, was the other thing that just got to me. It's like, you could at least mention it. It would have lessened the psychic damage I took if they would have been like, there's a game called Cyberpunk Red that you could play and play these types of characters. But we're gonna say how to make characters like this in 5th edition. That would have lessened the blow to me. But the fact that they didn't even mention it was one of those migraine-inducing moments for me.
They're like, this is how you make David in D&D.
Yeah,
and you're like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Why would you make David in D&D without trying to make him in Cyberpunk Red?
Yeah, why would you try playing Cyberpunk Red, the game that the whole show is based off of first?
Nah, that's not okay. So we're good. Yeah, I think that's maybe your petty thing is that if don't try to make it in D&D if there's a perfectly good system that it comes from too.
We'll just try other things. I think is more not everything has to be D&D. I get sometimes that. People, that's price limitations and stuff like that aside, just try other games once in a while. It's okay.
Yeah. So Jeff, what about you? Your
honestly,
pettiest take?
I think my pettiest, and so I will tell you what I think is my pettiest, and then I'm going to throw it back to you guys to see if you can remember something that I've said that was super petty. But just imagine you have a successful game, right? 10 years later, you launch kind of a beta playtesting thing where you actually give your updated rules a different name. And you have people playtest and you get feedback back. And then when you decide to finally publish the books, you're like, oh, it's not a new edition. It's not an update, even though a lot of stuff was updated. You're like, all of this stuff is 100% compatible and you can play with stuff from 10 years ago and stuff from today, but it's all still the same edition. Even though you can't really do that because a lot of the things that changed fundamentally changed some of the classes. I don't get what the hell Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, really is doing with whatever we want to call this edition. Because if you just go look online in fan forums, it's 5.5, it's 6. Everybody apparently gave up on 1 D&D, which is what Wizards was calling it, right?
For a while. I don't remember how long.
For a long time.
I think they gave up on that pretty early, didn't they?
They gave up on it themselves.
Yeah, they gave up on when we were still talking about it, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't care what they call it, but pretending like it's not a new edition of the game, and it's just this minor update. Well, then you didn't need to produce 3 new books about the rules. If it's minor, you didn't need to do that.
But how do you make those book sales?
I think reverse compatibility is a funny concept, anyways. So
yeah, I don't know. It still blows my mind. I mean, I had petty takes on like naming conventions for games and games that were named that maybe I didn't particularly think the names were all that clever or all that descriptive, but that's a choice thing. You know what I mean? That's a flavor thing, and your mileage is going to vary, right? There's things I'm not, but this thing with the D&D, it doesn't make any sense, and you're confusing your audience. You're absolutely confusing the audience.
They got some tips from the Savage Worlds people, and they were like, "How do you?"
Yeah. Why do you have these 2-player handbooks?
Well,
are they both 5th edition? Yep, they're both 5th edition.
Both 5th edition. One's just 20 years old, and the other one's
10
not.
years newer.
Yeah.
Were there changes? Oh yeah, a lot of changes. I don't get it. Sorry.
One of the things that I think is funny, and this is a little bit off the petty subject, but that I think is funny that I recently heard on a video was this concept that there's just one version of D&D now. Like they're really trying to push that narrative. When like it's funny because that only happened with the invention of the internet. Like there's one version of whatever game you're playing. I won't call out D&D specifically, but like if whatever game you're playing, that there's only one version of that is like a total creation of the internet. Because before, like if you bought a book in your table, like that was your game because there was no way anybody else knew what you were like, how you were playing it, and there was no one to ask if it was right or not.
Right? Yeah, you were house ruling.
Yeah,
you were making stuff up. You were filling in gaps. You were doing whatever you needed to.
You were reading rules wrong, like forever, and so like it's just funny to me, like that's like the new thing is like there's really only one version of D&D, and it's like, well, it's just like the dead games talk. It's like, well, why not play 3rd edition D&D if that's what you like? Like, why not just buy those old books and play that version of the game?
Yeah,
like,
if that's what you like, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's just funny to me that like I wonder how this living game idea is going to work out for them.
It doesn't work out in physical form. I can tell you that much.
Well, no.
So that's the first mistake you make is thinking that if you get a physical book out of the deal, that living part lasts for very long. Especially since I mean. That like I think Fallout, the Fallout RPG, one of the things that I found out after buying the book, and because I think when I bought it, I might have got the PDF of it, and they were like, it was just legendary when you went through like the change log of how many pieces of errata and how many things I had to update, because they were like, there was a gun that had reference to something that just didn't exist in another part of the book. Like, I mean, you were just like, what do they mean stock? What stock are they talking about? There's no stocks anywhere, like And so and it was little things, so you basically had like little booby traps because you were making your character and you were like, oh, this doesn't exist. Or
I thought of another petty take.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Shadowrun books, the old Shadowrun books used to be really bad at this. The self-referential pages where it's like you're reading along to figure something out, and then it says C rule on page 159, and then you'd go to like 159, and then you'd read that a little blurb, and then it would say C page 256, and then you'd go to the other page, and like you'd have to go to like 6 different pages to get all the information that you needed. Maybe that's not petty. Maybe that's actually a real problem.
It's a writing problem, especially if it's not laid out really well. And I think that there were, I can't remember one specifically, okay, but I think there were some that after like 3 or 4 steps, you wound up back on the first page,
right? Exactly.
To explain the last page, and it's like, if I could have gotten it out of this page, I wouldn't have gone any.
Yeah, I feel like these should all be centralized in one area, guys. Thanks. But maybe that's not petty. Maybe that's just like your map problem. Maybe it's an actual problem.
It's probably an actual problem because you're like, because you start getting into the game, you're like, how do I play this game? Oh, my rule is actually segmented into 6 parts of the book. Yeah. Perfect. So how about this? What we can do is we can read some of the best the pettiest takes on RPGs, and then we'll read some of the most controversials to see what generated the most.
My favorite one is I don't like the Blood Hunter because it's 2 words instead of 1, like all the other character classes in 5th edition. That's my favorite one.
So was that on like, did they do that on purpose? Because there was a lot of things, I thought, a lot of those subclasses that should have probably been 2 words, but they mashed them together into one.
Well,
so
all
that
the
they
core,
could
all the
copyright
core,
it.
all the core classes being one is. I mean, it was probably intentional back from when the game was a lot simpler,
Okay.
like fighter,
Yeah.
monk, etc.
And it's funny too, because some people are suggesting that like, oh well, Witcher was copyrighted because obviously that was the inspiration
Yeah.
that we, at least from our perspective, the inspiration that was for the Blood Hunter was the Witcher. But somebody responded to this just like, well, they could have been a thaumaturge, a wind hunter, an occultist, and sanguinager. They could have been any number of one word labels instead, which is kind of funny, especially since that seems
Blood
to
Hunter,
be.
but Blood Hunter does sound cool.
It kind of does. I mean, beware your blood.
I think it's a cool name, but I think they could have shoved it together and made it Blood Hunter instead of Blood Hunter. But I don't know that I care either.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, unfortunately, I never played with the class. So.
And really, honestly, as far as classes are concerned in D&D, like why is a fighter a fighter and a barbarian is a separate class? Why is a barbarian not under the fighter class?
Theme, buddy. Theme. So next on the best is the font you print your books in matters. I've tried so hard to love the Burning Wheel, but I can't friggin' read it. So this is that sounds a little more heavy than petty, and I agree.
Yeah,
with some
I
of the
think
commentators.
that's an editing problem. Like, yeah, that's like a printer. Yeah,
I forget what the reference was, but somebody was ranting about a book that was printed using a relatively common font that they said they couldn't read. That seems perfectly, legible to me. It like wasn't Times New Roman. It was, I don't know. Let's just say Garamond. And they were extremely upset that it was printed in. It wasn't printed in wingdings or papyrus or something, that would be actually unreadable. It was printed in something just serif instead of sans serif, or like.
Okay, Jeff, you could stop flexing the.
God.
Well, what's funny is he calls out. What's funny is when people talking about a book that they can't read, like human occupied landfill is all handwritten.
Like that one would seem challenging to read.
Like that's all handwritten. So, but it's funny, and some people there's some people that like fonts hurt people's eyes. So I don't know. I've never read Burning Wheel, so I don't know what font it's in. But that's pretty funny. If it's a normal font and he can't read it, it is kind of petty because it's like, well, no one else has this problem.
It made his eyes tired. He did not like it.
Yeah,
I just forget what it was.
Where there's whole other books, like the Morkborg book is beautiful, but like you can't read all that book.
It's a little hard to follow certain
parts.
parts.
Or there's those books that I got, the Underground books, the book from the 80s where like it's black text on this gray type background, and like you just can't, like, there's words on this page, but it looks like I need a pair of like those like 3D glasses to read it, like to get the words to pop out.
I don't know, because the background thing matters. Like somebody else mentions that there was a Savage Riffs was printed on like it had like small black hexagon background. And I don't remember what book this was, but it was like some book there was I saw a preview or something for it, and like the background was like this really intricate alchemical like image, but then the words were just printed on top of that. And so you had these really crazy lines interacting with the font. And I was like, no,
yeah, you just can't read
do
it. Yeah. So maybe his font take is a little petty, but there are actual examples of that being a problem.
Yeah. One of the other commentators.
I've seen books where it was hard to read, and a lot of it has to do with really artistic stuff, or like you said, the backgrounds. That isn't super fun.
But somebody did have to put a Zoolander reference in there. What is this? A game for ants? Must be small. I guess the font must be small.
Oh, it might be small. Yeah.
I don't know. Is that technically font, or is that typeset? I don't know. There's probably a technical.
Yeah, whatever.
Size, your size of your font matters. I don't know.
There was that one guy that hates D4s.
I think that's coming up here soon.
That's a pretty big thread.
Let's see. Next is people who say this RPG is good for beginners generally have no idea what a beginner needs. They also often confuse beginner player with beginner GM. Case in point, Quest. Ooh, that's interesting. My read through of Quest kind of made me think it was good for beginners, I guess. So trying to run that as a beginner GM was a nightmare straight from hell. Maybe my many years of experience as a GM.
I'm unfamiliar with Quest. What is its gimmick?
Quest is I don't know. It's like it's supposed to be a friendly RPG that you get into. It's got very minimal number of like stats that you have to track and everything along those lines, but it gives you kind of a fantasy-esque vibe.
But see, he's coming from the same thing that I usually say is like sometimes when you have those games that are highly narrative, like those are real hard for because you're basically like improv, go do something, don't roll dice, make something up, and that's hard for new people. Like, yeah, and especially if you're at a big table with like 5 people and it's like go do creative things.
So first things first, not to plug Quest, but they are giving the digital edition of the book away for free. So the digital edition contains the downloadable version of the game book and the core deck. So if anybody wants to try it and give their opinion as to why this would be so hard to run,
I'll have to take a look.
Yeah, I didn't feel like when I read through it, it seemed particularly complicated. However, when I read through it, it is like after 20 plus years of gaming. Right. So I'm like, well, this makes sense. That's a nice, neat way to put that.
And I will say, once you have kind of a firm idea of like how rules work in general in a role-playing game, like interpreting other rules, unless they're insane, is usually pretty easy. So that probably helped in your case. You're definitely not a beginner GM.
Yeah. So that is an interesting distinction. I guess me personally, I don't really know if somebody were to say, what would you recommend to a beginner DM to run? I would have to think that over quite a bit. Because somebody here says here, and people recommending 1-page RPGs to a newbie GM, have mercy. That's exactly what you were saying. Like there's no
there's no rules and structure. And like expecting people to improv that's not their background. Like you pick up a lot of improv skills when you GM or play a lot. And for somebody to expect that of somebody new, it's very, very hard. Like to just be like, entertain me, go. Here's a line of text, make it come to life. Like that's not easy for a lot of people.
Yeah. What was that? Slug Blaster? That one supposedly had a lot of structure, right? So I don't know, that's on my list of 2 plays at some point. But what else do we have here? We have the D4s are stupid. They don't roll. They're not easy to read, and they're lethal if you lose one on the floor. I'd rather have a D8 printed with 1D4 twice. Or just do with D8 like we do with D3s.
Yeah, D8,
is that really a petty take?
Split it in half. That's pretty petty. Like,
but could they be a wounded person at this point? Like they had actually stepped on a D4 at some point in their life, and
I mean, I've stepped on a D4 before in my life, so yeah, it hurts.
Yeah, no, they do hurt.
You could use them as caltrops in a hallway in a situation where you're being burglarized.
That was the part of Home Alone that got cut out. They were like, "Oh, that's too real, man." Just a bunch of D4s. Okay. When I see someone claim a game having cinematic, fast-paced combat with deep tactical decision-making, I assume they either don't understand at least one of those things or they're lying for the sake of advertising.
That also is not a petty take. That is a true problem with games because those things are not compatible. Cinematic combat and tactical combat are
yeah, they're not the same thing.
Those are on 2 sides of a spectrum in most role-playing games, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because like one of the commenters, the top commenter says like cinematic fast-paced combat equals your attack inflicts narrative tags on your opponents instead of rolling dice and doing math. You don't deal D8 damage, you make your opponent staggered. And deep tactical decision making equals you have the ability to choose between 3 different tag inflicting skills that can synergize with your and your teammates' abilities for extra effects. That kind of feels like it's a good nutshell summary of it, right?
Right, and a lot of movement stuff. Like, I think they forget tactical combat usually involves a lot of like square movement and flanking, and like you said, synergy with another player.
Mhm. But do you think that now there is a question in there that exists, that do you think that having cinematic, fast-paced combat with deep tactical decision making are those opposites?
I think they're on separate sides of the spectrum, because tactical implies that you're thinking about it a lot. Cinematic, fast-paced implies that you're not. Like tactical implies that you're looking at like a chessboard. Cinematic implies that you're looking at like an action movie, which means that it's quick and exciting, versus tactical is more like a thought experiment, in my opinion.
That's fair, because like Final Fantasy Tactics, plays very differently than, I don't know, Diablo. Like
Right, exactly.
they might be tactical somewhat and fast paced in both. You know what I'm saying? They might.
Well,
have
you
some
can
of those
have
levers, but they're
you can have tactics in a cinematic game, but it's not as tactical, because like I said, there's a lot of tactical implies planning. Like I said, when you say a tactical combat game, like my first thought is like a grid.
yeah.
Like chess or
Sure.
those grid-based combat games.
Okay. Well, fair enough. Fair enough. Did you guys want to hit any more top ones, or did you want to see what some of the most controversial takes
What
were?
were some of the well, maybe one more top one, and then let's hit some controversial ones.
Okay, so one. So let's see. This is a petty take. Apparently, Shadow of the Weird Wizard was meant to have a different name that I can't even remember, but I'm still salty enough about them changing it that I won't give it a shot.
Okay.
Now, that's
pretty petty.
Yeah.
According to the top commenter under that thread, it had many names. Shadow of the Witch King. That can be kind of fun. Free Companies of Four Towers. I never played Shadow of the Demon Lord, so I have no context for that. Shadow of the Mad Wizard. Okay. What happened? And they went with Weird Wizard after all those games. And so it's due to a character from the lore of Shadow of the Demon Lord and Shadow of the Weird Wizard. The Weird Wizard is kind of a mysterious figure that basically both protected the world and created a bunch of strange monster. Now he's disappeared, blah, blah, blah.
Well, the funny part is that guy's trying to give an explanation as to why it's that way, and I'm sure that the petty guy doesn't care. I'm sure he's like, nope, too late.
Too late. The other ones were way cooler.
The ones I don't remember were much better than this one.
Well, but I mean, like I have Tales of the Valiant right here. That was Project Black Flag. How fucking cool was that name? And then,
then they came up with Tales of the Valiant.
Yeah.
That was a downgrade. I'm sorry, it was.
Yeah, I mean,
but Project Black Flag didn't describe the game at all, because Project Black Flag is a pirate game for sure, and that is a fantasy game.
Yeah.
Oh my god, you're gonna make me say it, right?
What?
Draw Steel, to me, sounds like a game that all you do is combat. All you do is run around. You find monsters and yell at them, draw steel, and we're in combat.
But again, they couldn't just keep it as MCDM, I don't think.
No, that would have been worse. The draw steel was an upgrade.
I think if there would have been like a solid black cover with gold lettering across the top that just MCDM, bump, 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 like it just hits.
So you're saying a game that is called Roll Initiative? The game is probably not probably implies something that you don't want to sell.
No, I'm just saying that to me, the name implies that it's all just combat, and I don't think the game is all just combat. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I'm not sure.
That's what the name implies to me.
But Roll Initiative would imply that the game is just all combat.
For some reason, our Kickstarter for Roll Initiative, a narrative game about diplomatic maneuvering, never got very many.
People kept saying they're confused.
We explained it in the 3-hour-long video hyping this.
Oh god,
that's terrible. That's terrible.
That'd be amazing.
One more message here: that core rulebooks and adventures should be written like a lawnmower manual, not a fantasy novel. They need to be quick to read and easy to understand. Save your prose for setting guides.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I
Kind of
think
go back to your.
I think they should be written more like textbooks, and then flavor text and examples of play in there for
Yeah.
entertainment.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because I mean to kind of avoid some of the problems that you had where you're like, well, I need 12 places to go find this rule, or sometimes where things get out of sync. I don't remember which game it was, where it was like how to hit was actually like farther ahead in the combat chapter than like how to resolve a hit or something like that. So hadn't actually learned how to hit something, and I was already learning about other damage types or something.
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Um,
that reminds me of the books where like how to build a character is like chapter 16. Like
mhm,
I just picked up this book. I'm excited to play this game. I want to create a character, and now I got to hunt for stuff. Or when the character creation stuff isn't actually all together or following each other. Some of it's chapter 5, some of it's chapter 12. There's a little bit in chapter 2. Like I just want to play the damn game.
Yeah.
You know.
Having the rules like I think having it designed like more like a, and I hate to say it because textbooks are hard to read, but
They are.
like it should be more like a textbook. But I think you could make it more like a textbook and have cool stuff like flavor, like the flavor at the beginning of every page, and then rule like there definitely should be like examples of play and how you do stuff in there.
mhm,
Like there's a book over the edge second edition, that was one of my favorite things, is there's all the rules in the beginning, and then one of the things that Tweet did when he wrote it is there's just long like expositions of examples of play and how he runs the game, and I just
mhm.
think that was really helpful and entertaining
Yeah,
to read little articles about how to run the game. So yeah, that's annoying.
I get it. Do you guys want to check out those
Yeah.
controversials and
What are
see
some
what?
hot takes? What are some
Yeah,
hot takes from Reddit?
give us some really poor hot takes.
Okay, well, so controversial, I believe, on Reddit basically means things that have like wild swings and ups and down votes. They still can be
Yes.
positive upvotes, but they get a lot of down votes as well as upvotes. This one is D&D is a great beginner's game. The world of tabletop RPGs is so much bigger, more interesting, and better, in my opinion, than D&D. I don't think that's a petty take. Really
No,
controversial.
and like we've talked about, like D&D is kind of a social like benchmark. Like most people know about it without knowing they know about it. So it is probably a good game. Like
Mhm.
it's like roll a d20 is something people are familiar with enough to where it's probably a good intro.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think that's so much a hot
Yeah, I
take.
didn't think that one was that controversial.
Yeah. Okay. Next. OSR as a genre is dumb. It's designed to appeal solely to hipsters and reactionaries, and I can't stand this subreddit is basically turned into r/OSR. It's taken all the air out of the room. Wow, this guy keeps going. Or
Wow.
person. I don't know if they're a guy, but blah 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 blah.
Well,
Yeah.
we've talked about the OSR thing a little bit, where it's like we can't really always define what it is, even.
Mhm.
Where we look at it and we're like, is this an OSR game? Is this an OSR game? And I think if you have a problem defining a thing, yeah, it's probably a problem.
Yeah. But it's taken all the air out of the room, and we could be using to discuss D&D alternatives that have a reason to exist and that tell different kinds of stories. Instead, I just constantly hear about the newest Kickstarter reskin of an edition of D&D we already played to death in the 80s and 90s, and collectively dropped on the floor as soon as a better edition came along. I mean, they're not wrong.
No,
I
they're not
I
wrong.
can't say that I can't say that I'm in r slash RPG enough to notice that that's what it is. I mean, there is an
I
OSR
definitely,
subreddit, but
yeah, I definitely am not in that enough.
Yeah,
But
I'm not in there
and
enough
I
to
th-
be.
and I think it's funny that he says that we've just dropped on the floor as soon as they're a new edition, because that's kind of true. But a lot of times people pick those books back up and like
Mhm.
start taking a
Well,
look at them.
yeah,
All right.
I mean, I think it's okay to play whatever you want. I think it's when you start gatekeeping or getting down on people for playing a game that you don't particularly want to play. That's I'm not saying there shouldn't be some debate, but let people play the games they want to play.
Yeah.
If you want to play an OSR game, great. If you want to play the newest RPG out of Japan where you're translating the book yourself, more power
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah. Have fun.
You're
And
not
I
doing
think this is
you're not doing your fun wrong, like we say. Like really, you're not.
Right.
yeah. So I think this will be the last one, and then we'll get it wrapped up here. But this one is actually kind of good because the moment you refer to the events of the game as the fiction, I'm out. You have crafted the most brilliant, perfect RPG system ever created, a system that is hotter than a crack house spoon on payday. If it refers to the fiction, I am full stop. Throwing the book over my shoulder as I walk away in disgust. Done.
The fiction.
Yeah, isn't that like a Apocalypse World thing?
It just sounds a little pretentious.
It does, but I'm trying to think of a game that says that. It obviously doesn't bother me because I'm sure I've read it in a book before and I missed it.
But I thought like Monster of the Week referred to it as the fiction. Is that not true?
I don't know.
Honest to God, I don't remember. Like it doesn't stick out to me because it doesn't. I would go. That's an odd word choice and maybe a little pretentious, but I don't think it would. It wouldn't make me slam on the brakes like it did to this person.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I'm with Brent in this, is that I've definitely probably read that somewhere in some of the more narrative heavy games, but I haven't, but it hasn't obviously like been just stone cold, take the book, rip it off the binding and then throw it away.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah. I haven't. I don't recall that being used. So I just, I don't know why it's a trigger word for this person. I'm sorry that the fiction hurt you. But to me, it's just like words like lore or story or whatever.
Yeah, call it, if you called it the world, I mean, is it, you're creating a world, you're creating a fictional world, right? It's not a real world that we're playing in. It's real to the characters, but not the players.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting hot button word for somebody.
Yeah,
now I'm trying to think of a word that a new RPG would use that I would just stop reading the book, but I can't think of one.
Hey, Mike, how did you skip over D12 is the best die?
That's not really petty. That's just
D20's too rolly. D8's not rolly enough.
He's big up in the D12s.
D12, best dice ever.
He's like repping the D12s.
Well, I mean, it is like dice takes like that. I don't know how that's really petty though. Like,
I know. I was just
like,
well, I mean, hating D4s is kind of petty, but like just being like big up. I'm a big ups to D12. I'm a big D12 fan. Like, I don't understand it, but I can't say that that's petty.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like repping for D12s. Like, I don't know what they're promoting. But what I can say is that if I'm playing in person, because I really do like the play in person type of thing, dice props and fucking weird dice do get to me a little bit. Like, and I get it.
We can't make a game with D3s and D7s. And
no, he means the ones you can't read. He means the dwarven mechanical D20s that are like cylindrical and this long and like
you can't see what they rolled, and it's like they can kind of choose one of three options, or B, they never stop rolling because there's some weird fucking spinner thing, and you're like 2 hours later, you're like, how did that come along? And they're like, almost there.
Mike's saying he hates gimmicky dice is what he's really saying.
Okay. That's fair. No.
And like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the appeal of having someone bring out their fucking crazy dice tower could be kind of funny, but like, I don't need that. If you just a dice tray, that's fine. Done.
I do hate dice you can't read. I do hate dice.
No, I've seen some. I've seen some beautiful dice that I have ultimately not purchased because I'm like, I can't read that, and I don't think anybody else at the table is going to be able to read that.
So there's at least a petty take about dice you can have.
That's fair.
But like, because honestly, if somebody showed up to my table and all they had were these spin top dice, I might just take them away and make them roll my dice.
Or they're like gunslinger six shooter dice thing that they spin.
And it's like a fidget spinner, so it's like well greased and great bearings. So
yeah,
it never stops.
Yeah, they got space age bearings. They're virtually frictionless. You're just gonna wait for an hour.
I think I was at a table once where somebody had a top dice like that, and I just went over and.
That's what you have to do. Like,
no, that's where you flick it off the table.
It's cocked.
Right.
Yeah, 2 hours later, I can't tell if that's a. I
If the
got to roll
dice
it
takes
again.
longer than 3 seconds to settle after it leaves your hand or you're done spinning it, we
This
have a problem.
this combat has been an hour longer than it needed to be because your dice never stop moving.
Yeah.
Okay, that's petty. That's fair.
Yeah.
We added to
It's
the
like
discussion.
so. Just so that there is a take out there, but I think now it's time that anybody that's made it to the 40-minute mark or wherever we're at, if they have any petty takes they want to add, throw them in the comments. Let us know what you guys feel are some petty takes about role-playing games that you want to share. Anything really, just throw them in the comments. We'd love to hear them. That would be a lot of fun. If we find any that are exceptionally petty, you never know, they might come up at a future episode. Inspired by. So I think that's good. Well, thanks for the conversation today, guys. And if they want to talk to us outside of the comments, Jeff, where do they go?
They find us on Blue Sky, Facebook, Threads, and Twitter. We are at Rollwise. You can also email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining our table. And roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there, everybody.
Thanks.
Yeah.